Now, when trimming, no matter what it is, the first thing we have to do is measure how much clay is at the base so that we have an idea of how much to remove without going through. So the way we do that is with the piece upright, we're going to take the ruler, this ruler's a little bent, we're going to place it across the top, and then we're going to take another ruler straight down into the bottom to check out the measurement. And right here the two rulers intersect at 8 centimeters. Now I'm going to take the same ruler and I'm going to slide it out here, and I can see that it intersects right at 9 centimeters, which means I only have about 1 centimeter to trim away in the bottom. That's 1 centimeter thickness, so I don't have much to trim, so we're going to be real delicate with this. Once I measure, now I have to turn the piece over and get it centered on the Giffin Grip. This piece of equipment is called a Giffin Grip, and it has sliders that slide in to hold your piece in place. So I have the sliders turned around right now for these pads to hold the bowl, because if I were to use the fingers, they wouldn't reach because the bowl flares out a little bit. Okay, so we dial it in to hold the bowl in place, make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And then double check to make sure that the piece is centered by kicking a little bit and just touching basically where my foot is to make sure that that is pretty consistent, and that is fairly consistent. Now when you work with the kick wheel, the whole idea is that you kick with your right foot towards the door and you get it going at a good pace. Then you rest your feet, rest your knees right up against the side, and so right here we're going to establish the glaze line before we do anything else. I'm going to take my tool, I'm going to use the corner of this loop tool, and I'm going to brace my elbows nice and tight, my knees are nice and tight against the splash pan, and I'm going to use 2 hands. I have the tool held in my right hand, and then my left hand is going to brace it. And I'm going to start right at the top, and I am going to trim and spiral downwards to establish this outside foot and the glaze line. So I'm just trimming a little clay away there. Now I'm going to turn the tool and I'm going to just clean up this edge. I have a little chunk there. I can trim a little bit of this away to just kind of clean it up some. I don't want to see the transition where the tool was, so if your clay has still got a little bit of softness to it, you can take your finger and go backwards and just kind of rub it out so that you don't see where the tool was. If your clay is a little bit too dry to rub out that mark, you could always get a damp sponge and go over it with a damp sponge. So now I have an edge. This is the outside of my foot. This is my glaze will stop here, right at this line when I glaze later, and my foot will stay nice and clean. Okay. For this, I'm going to spiral from the center. I changed tools. I got the larger trimming tool, and again, my elbows are braced on my legs. The tool's in my right hand, and my left hand over the top is going to hold it steady. I have the tool turning towards the way the clay is spinning into it so that it can cut. And I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to do a very gentle spiral out. All I'm doing is removing any of the bumps that were created with the wire cutter when I took this off the wheel head. I'm not trying to take a lot away because when I measured, I didn't have a lot of clay here to start with. So I definitely don't want to take a lot away. Now I'm going to establish the foot. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to spiral one more time. And this time I'm going to stop right around 1/4 inch over so that I can create a foot and the inside is recessed. The reason we want the inside to be recessed is because we never want the center of the piece to touch the table. If the center of the piece touches the table, the piece is going to wobble. So I'm taking a little bit more clay away this time as I spiral slowly, holding the tool with 2 hands. And I'm going to stop right about here. The size of your foot is determined by how big your piece is, and my bowl is a decent size, so I need a decent sized foot. Now, in order to get rid of these spiral lines, I'm going to use the flat side of the tool. I'm going to turn the tool. I'm going to start from the outside here, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit and do a reverse pull at the same time. Just like working on the wheel, you want to compact the clay, make sure everything is nice and compressed, and you clean up any little lumps and bumps. So I'll come back in, reverse pull. We want to avoid those S cracks as the piece dries. Now, how do I know, because I have a slight slant here, how do I know if this is far enough in? I'll stop the wheel and I'll lay the ruler across the bottom of the foot. And now I have to look to see, is there daylight through the center? And there's actually not. So I have to take a little bit more away here in the center. You always want to check that. So I'm going to go back to spiraling to remove clay. So get a little more out of there. You don't need a lot of daylight, just a little bit. Just enough so it's not touching. And now I'll go back in and get rid of the spiral lines again. Second to last thing that we're going to do is we're going to clean up and shape our foot. Now, if I look on the inside here, I could see that this is much higher than it is out here, which means it's thicker here than here because the inside of my bowl is on a slope. So I'm going to come in this corner, and on an angle, I'm going to slope a little bit more of that away. And that's going to give me a little higher of a foot. Okay, now I can clean this up. I can decide if I want this to be rounded or if I want this to be faceted in some way. I could put a little bit more of an angle on here. I can curve it and soften it. Depends on the design of your bowl. I could use the rounded part, and I can come in here and give it a slight inward curve. But I'm focusing on keeping this line nice and crisp. I don't want to eliminate that line. So if I soften this edge, I can even use my finger to soften it a little. And then I can come in here and clean this up. When people look at your work, your bottom's just as important as the top, because the first thing people do without even thinking about it is to flip it over to look at your signature. So you need your trimmed bottom not only to be functionally finished well, but you need it to also be aesthetically finished well. You want it to look nice when they flip it over. Feel a little bump there, so I'm going to spiral out this a little bit. So now we'll just clean this up just a little bit. And now I have a nice clean foot. I can soften with my fingers so I don't have sharp edges that will cut the table. And the very last thing you need to do is sign your work, always. I use a nice dull pencil because I don't need to dig in real deep. Get your crumbs out of the way, and you're all finished.